right, welcome to Grimerica Goes Deep, Ancient Mysteries and Lost Civilizations. This is chapter 4 and maybe 5 with talking about the hidden history of Tartaria and America and the Americas with Flavortown and Armouro. Welcome, guys. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us on, Darren Graham.
Yes.
Long time, first time.
Yeah, I'm excited to get into this one. I've been sort of slipping down that Tartaria slope myself for the last couple months. It kind of tied in with interesting timing because I just got into a bunch of Rome stuff, and then that sort of spilled over into starting to research some of the Tartaria stuff. Our buddy Snow Shaman in the chats was sending me all kinds of stuff on there all the time.
Shout out.
And I've just been falling down this sort of rabbit hole, and the Roman history has always kind of been interesting to me. So that kind of seems to fit into it in a certain way. And then I mean, it could really be encompassing a lot more than that. So I'm eager to get into what you guys have found, because you guys have been going deep on this for a few years now.
Yes, I started probably back in 2017. I think I came across it on a Reddit thread. Somebody posted some link to the Stolen History forums. And ever since then, I've just been on there and doing research and creating stuff over there. And it's 3 years along, and the research has evolved in some really interesting ways. Some ways that I'm not a huge fan of, and some other ways that are pretty promising. So, I mean, at this point, I think we're at the point, where there's enough questions that we can start getting actual boots on the ground and getting people to hopefully get out there, learn more about this, go to your own area where you live, because a lot of this research, you'd be surprised. A lot of weird historical inaccuracies you can find in your own hometown or the town you live in. And that's a great place to start. And then you get into communication with other people and they start connecting the dots. And then next thing you know, we're one step closer. So that's kind of why I wanted to come on and spread the word.
That's great. How about you, Armouro?
I got bored one day. I got really bored. There comes a point in your life when, like the Truman Show, somebody says everything's been explored and everything's been discovered. And how exciting to find out that is in no way true. Not at all. Started off in early 2018 by myself, and by 2019, I'd found this all-star cast of excited people who had their own localities and their own digs into separate history events and inconsistencies. And this little shoot of interest has blossomed into something I can't even describe in a sentence. There's a lot, and it never goes where you think it's going to take you.
And it just opens up more questions, it seems.
Mm-hmm. Always.
So where do you guys want to start then? Because there's a million places to start.
Well, we should probably hit the big ones, right? Hit the big boys right off the bat. The ones that everybody seems to know, or at least have like vaguely heard of.
Yeah, let's do it.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, like, that would be, I guess, Tartaria is what you're saying, or as far as this new thing. And I mean, the thing that I've been very skeptical about this as well, but when you see the old maps that aren't that old and they show this big area, Tartaria, and it mixes up with some of the accepted history. The Huns had control of the Silk Road, they say, a few hundred years after AD, and then 1,500 years later, Tartaria exists on these maps. So it is weird to me that's just, how do you tease apart like the mystery compared to like the actual accepted history?
Yep. So what the mainstream says is Tartaria was a loose association of nomadic tribes that all banded together and kind of had this like agreement, I guess, It wasn't really, they say it wasn't really a government. It didn't really have a leader. It was just, the steppes, which, is central, basically from the Black Sea, Balkan area, all the way through to Siberia, essentially. So one of the largest, if not the largest, continuous landmass on the planet was inhabited by, according to the mainstream, just a bunch of dudes on horses drinking milk. Just just some good old boys riding around and eating animal fat and just having a good time. Occasionally they'd push into Europe and ransack some shit, barbarians, whatever. And that's kind of true. I don't think that there wasn't a proud race of horse boys roaming around the steppes.
A golden horde.
Yeah, like I don't think that it's impossible to believe that. However, what was behind that? Was it really just a nomadic, random occurrence, or were these a sort of paid or trained military force for an actual civilization that were using these horsemen as a buffer between them and the Western world? Because you see that in like the Great Wall of China has a lot of really bizarre areas where it doesn't actually look like it's pointed in the direction that it says it's supposed to be defending against. And there's lots of walls. There's lots of defensive walls inside of China and all these things. There is a Tartar wall, I think, is it Beijing? I don't know if it's Beijing or Peking. I forget which city it is. But there's a Tartar wall there.
There seems to be some similarity between that wall in England and the Great Wall of China as well. It almost seems like that wall that goes across England could be maybe an earlier version.
The wall in England,
Hadrian's
you're referring to Hadrian's Wall?
Hadrian's Wall, yeah.
Now, Hadrian's Wall is, honestly, it looks like a haystack palisade compared to the Gorgon Wall, which is actually quite near. Is one of the major structures we've found that mimics in some form the Great Wall that exists way over there. So it's funny that we mention Hadrian's Wall. The Gorgon's Wall is 1,800 kilometers and 10 times the size.
So that's interesting because nobody talks about the Gorgon's Wall.
Nope. Yeah. Doesn't ring a bell. Incredibly long, though.
And then you connect that to the North American walls in ancient North America in the Northeast, and also like into Vermont and Connecticut and Maine, and all these places in the Northeast are filled with thousands and thousands and thousands of miles of rock walls. I'd imagine there probably have been even bigger ones, but at this point they've been so repurposed and just used to probably build other things and quarried out that it's pretty unrecognizable in North America. And I think they made sure they did an extra good job on making sure North America was squeaky clean post 1850 through 1930. That they were really focused on making sure that they got rid of as much recent cataclysm and former civilization evidence, more so than they did in Europe and Russia and all these other places. There was a lot of money spent in that period of time trying to get us to the civilization that we live in now.
Wow.
That's one of the unique things you can find about North America is the United States of America claims that aside from teepees, no one was here first. We were here first. And that's a narrative that has constantly been shown to be false.
Exactly. So Tartaria is definitely on maps. There's actually there's several maps. I actually will screen share a few of them. And let's see. Okay, I'll have to figure that out in a second. But there's actually maps with that show Tartary in 3 different regions. So there's like a Grand Tartary, there's a Muscovy Tartary, and what's the third one? Manchu Tartary, I think, is what it is.
Chinese Tartary or Xinhua.
Yeah. So these, and they're distinctly different things on the map. All right, here we go. You guys see this? Or can you just see the folder?
We can see the screen.
We can see your folder.
Okay. Sorry. I'm going to
It's
share the
okay.
entire
No,
screen.
it's okay.
I'm having a boomer moment. Bear with me.
Boomer. Okay,
Yeah.
boomer.
It's okay. I did an even more boomer thing. It's fine. All right. Here
You're not
we go.
a boomer, though, are you?
No, I'm definitely not a boomer. All right. So we have some maps here. We have Tartaria. And then we have, so we have like a Mongolia, China. We have Persia here. And then it's basically split down the middle here with Muscovy, Russia, and Tartaria. So it's 2 pretty distinct civilizations, according to this map, which I do believe is true. I do think that there were multiple distinct races of people here, the Russian Muscovy side being the sort of Indo-European race, and Tartaria, the Tartarians being this sort of you can see Magog right here, by the way.
So let's just go through this a little bit. So Muscovy is in the top left there.
Yeah,
and
Muscovy's
then
in the top
and then Tartaria is the pink area in the middle, and then that sea that sort of splits them both on the left. Is that the Caspian then, or which one is that?
This is either this is the Caspian Sea right here.
So so then what would be to the top right where there's nothing up there, like, or is Tartaria actually filling all of current?
I think it's Russia? Just I just think they just didn't finish out this map to the northeast.
Okay,
so
good.
yeah.
So China would be right smack in the middle of that then.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so here's another example,
just to put it in context,
of just sort of this is filled out to the northeast, but here's the dividing line to Europe and Muscovy here. So yeah, I mean, there's plenty of examples of this. Oh, here's the one I was talking about. So you have Russian Tartary, Siberia up here in the north. Then you have an independent Tartary here in the center. And to the east, you have Chinese Tartary. So 3 pretty distinct, and you can see here the rest of the countries are filled out. And, all of these countries have flags, they have leaders. I mean, Persia, Arabia, all these places are distinct civilizations. So to say that they're just this loosely associated group of
nomads,
Mongols is ridiculous. There's no precedent for it, and the major issue is that there's plenty of evidence of this. You can go and you find books previous to like 1850. There are books that are discussing Tartary as if it is a civilization, as if they're a race of people.
Wow.
I mean, there's nothing crazy in there. I mean, let's put it this way: we're not talking about
Atlantis,
free energy, flying around, everything was amazing, utopia, steampunk Tartary here. I just want to make that clear to everyone that there is a distinction in this research where people are very quick to jump straight to, okay, they were a civilization, they were wiped off the map, because they were. I mean, they were literally wiped off the map. Like, there are just no maps depicting Tartary anymore. They were literally wiped off the map. So obviously, they were a utopian, perfect, free energy civilization that had everything figured out, and we killed all of them.
Oh, and they had to have been good guys.
Exactly.
They had to have been.
They were definitely the good guys, because the bad guys are the ones that won. And it's not 2 really shitty, potentially control systems battling against each other. Because that, only evil and good exists in the world. Everyone just falls into a category of being good and evil. So obviously these were the good guys, and they lost.
Because the good guys wouldn't rewrite history.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what was I going to say about that? Just continue. I've lost it.
So there's a magic Tartary that that people walk into, usually on a Facebook group.
That's what I was going to ask. Yeah. Is that to speculate? Is that on purpose? Like, has that been hijacked? Has this whole thing been hijacked like everything else?
Yes.
You know, seeded with disinformation, pushing
Absolutely.
people down to the extreme so you can just go, oh, all these people believe in another Atlantis or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This thing is born of 8 delicious eggs. You have the flat earth egg, you have the hidden history egg, you have the Russia is evil egg, you have the China is evil egg. I mean, all of these things whipped up into an omelet, everybody arguing over which one Tartary belongs to. And then you have the free energy guys too. That's a big one. But
Electric Universe guys are starting to come in on it too.
oh, you know what they are.
Mm-hmm.
But outside of all that, we're searching for clear clues of what appears to be a recent mass genocide.
Yeah. Extermination, reset, cataclysm, whatever you want to call it. It's probably a combination of all of those things. And it's probably
Opportunism.
something that happened in several stages. I think there was a large scale cataclysm disaster. I don't know if it was natural. I don't know if it was a weapon. I don't know if it was a combination of both, where they were taking advantage of a natural disaster and then going in afterwards and cleaning up with advanced weapons. But something seems to have happened between somewhere around 1492. I'm just going to throw that number out there because I think that's a interesting starting point, because a lot of history seems to start there. A lot of founding of different things seems to start there. I mean, obviously Columbus, that whole esoteric story of the founding of America, whatever that means. 1492. It's kind of like it's like the 1947 that group, the 1947 group that you guys are compiling. It's the same thing like that, but with 1492.
Oh yeah,
So,
1492 is another 1982.
yeah. So the first event happened sometime around there, because that's when the forging of historical relics really took off. That's when all of these monks were in their monasteries and their abbeys getting paid to crank out pagan manuscripts, just like Roman, like they're taking Plato. Like here, okay, so here you have 1500s, you're in France, you're a young and upcoming monk, and the way you make money for your abbey is you sit around all day and you hand copy onto pieces of cowskin a pagan document written by a Roman historian from 1500 years ago that is based off of a few fragments, maybe. I don't know what they actually had. I mean, we've never seen the primary sources of a lot of where these manuscripts come from. And you have that explode in the beginning of the 1500s, or late 1400s, early 1500s. So there was an attempt to flood the zone, if you will, with forged or, repurposed manuscripted history. When you go back and you look at sources for ancient Rome, you will find that you cannot find those sources originally. You can find like a couple of scraps, but what you're going to find is most of the time it was something written in like 400 AD that the only copy we have was found in the 1800s, but it was written in the 900 or 1100 or 1400. You got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years after these events are supposed to have taken place, sometimes thousands. But we've never seen the original documents. So we're talking about copies of copies of copies of history here. And that is a big problem with trying to put together a historical chronology, because we don't know what is real versus what was manufactured 500 years ago to be passed off as real.
That's funny, because I was reading some some journal entries or something or evidence of in that same sort of period between 1000 and 1500 where the priests would get caught like actually scraping off old parchment papers. Like they had figured out a way that they could take this parchment that was 1500 years old and scrape the top off it and rewrite it whatever they want, and then they'd start taking that, you know, as the gospel. And there just seems to be from like 500, I mean, if we're following the conventional timeline, there seems to be like a clear effort from the Christian or Catholics priests specifically to sort of take over the place, for lack of a better word.
They even show some of that in the Viking show, where when they're in the northern UK monasteries, they've got that whole downstairs, and they're just recopying all this, or it looks like they're just recopying all this ancient Roman stuff.
The forgeries are threefold, in fact, because you have the creations of entire societies like the Royal Historical Society and archaeology and the Smithsonian and everything, initially created to go out and find and prove the church's story right. And that's where paleontology even comes from, and archaeology. But there's the famous case of the Benedictine monks in the 14th century proving that they had the rights to an abbey by forging a history dated back to the 10th century and being found out, I think, in the early 19th century. But they actually won a court case using this forgery.
Yeah.
And so you basically have proved my story right, or this building belongs to me.
Exactly. And yeah, you get into the situation where you have, you know, organizations like, you know, the church, you know, the Vatican, whatever organizations,
Smithsonian.
Yeah. Essentially backdating their own history. So to justify, you know, the Vatican's reign, they decided to arbitrarily extend its own timeline by an additional 1,000 years, so that when the, you know, dirty plebs are born and they're, you know, thrown into the mud, nobody, what are they going to do? They can't read. They're not going to these abbeys and looking through the manuscripts themselves. They're told by the people that own them that the church has been around for 1,000 years, and that's all they knew, and that's all they ever knew for generations and generations and generations. And now we've just adopted that brainwashing as a timeline, and they will copy other timelines from other parts of the world and just paste them onto their own timeline to extend it out. So and it's not just the Western timelines that are doing this. It's a fallacy to assume that the Western Scalinger chronology and are the only culprits of this. I mean, you know, the Chinese have their own record keeping that's probably filled with all kinds of shit. The Russians, I mean, the fact that the Russians are even able to piece anything together right now about their own history is insane. The level to which they've been completely removed from their own historical narrative. It's funny. The hidden history and all these kind of alternative history topics, you think it's getting big here. It's been big in Russia for a while now.
That's a huge issue with us, actually, because there is this ever-present Cyrillic barrier where we can't even dig into their archives. We have to wait for one of them to be interested and bring us something, because they're just fine learning English, but apparently none of us can learn Russian.
Exactly. So I'm one of the staff members, moderators of the new Stolen History Forum, which is stolenhistory.net. .org. .org is a long story. We probably don't need to get into that on here, but it's not .org that I'm associated with. I am associated with .net. That is the new version with some archive stuff from an old forum. And one of the things I'm really enjoying about that site is that we are getting Russians showing up there. They're because you can't really do it through YouTube. If you don't know Russian, you can't watch Russian YouTube researchers.
Right.
But there are researchers who know how to use the translators, and the translators are getting pretty good as far as doing that goes. And essentially, we've been having some dialogue with a few of those researchers over there, and it's been interesting, very eye-opening to see the results of a lot of their work, because it is very in-depth and it is pretty thorough. I don't know, again, if I believe all of it, whatever. It does have a tinge of that, sort of Russian nationalism. Everything started in Russia, and whatever. I mean, sure, I'm open to it. I'm not obviously going to commit to it, but it is very interesting, and we're finally starting to see a little bit more of that, at least where I'm doing research.
But is that part of, I mean, the conspiratorial part of me starts going to like, is that why we're in the Western world, we're pushing back? One of the many reasons why we're pushing back so hard against Russia, because they are sort of open to this alternate history, or there's almost like a rogueness still over there that's not complying.
Yes, I think
so. Russia is, what would you say, a third of our entire populace as far as the first world is concerned. If we can break that barrier between Russia, that's a lot more people having a lot more conversations, and they've been largely isolated from the West until the internet. And that would be a big deal for a number of reasons. Like when we started digging into America and what happened over here, and possible trade routes between America and Russia, between Muscovites, the Aleutians, everything. If we can piece together this block of history wherein we might have seen travel through these regions, it would force a rewrite of that block of history, even a bit, because you guys, I'm sure you're familiar with the old idea that the oceans are barriers, when in fact, thanks to recent research and points, and even a couple books, and live tests, the 4 Scotsmen made a rawhide boat and came to America in it in 4 days. The oceans are highways. And so for that to not be true of the ancient world, there's a hidden connection there.
They made it to America in 4 days?
Yeah. These guys made a boat out of bone and hide and wood. In the ocean currents, I mean, you can literally just plop yourself in a current and drift on some ocean rubbish and find yourself in another land.
Yeah, that seems to be and the interesting thing is that like those currents go straight from Africa to like the Caribbean and the southern Americas as well.
They do. So if every great thinker on every great landmass in every single age had figured out the stars so well that it takes the average human today at least a decade to comprehend the lot of them, how have we not pieced together that some guys can hop in a boat in a piece of water?
So one of the recent rabbit holes I went down was the connection to Tartaria and early America, because there are absolutely connections, and I think they're related to what we were just talking about, which is the currents and being able to easily reach. I mean, Bering land mass, whatever, the land bridge. Sure. I mean, maybe that existed at some point. I'm not saying that it didn't, who knows. But the important thing is I don't think that it's also an extremely long way to go.
Way harder on land than by sea.
Yeah. Like I could see them, and there's not even really any direct benefit to setting up shop there. I mean, unless it wasn't an Arctic, wasteland or ice age, I mean, sure, maybe, but boats would obviously be the superior way of transportation. And I believe that they did send a large group of these warriors, these Monguls, whatever you want to call them, the Golden Horde type people, they went to America and they landed in the Pacific Northwest and in, where, Canada and Alaska and all those areas. And really, I think concentrated in San Francisco, and where San Francisco and Seattle are now. Because I believe that those two areas have been pretty advanced, developed port cities for a lot longer than our own history tells us. So
well,
they've been.
The thing about the Bering Land Strait mass or whatever is I always kind of figured that would be sort of more like boats anyway. It'd be more like boats riding that coastline, which might be very like Alaska-like, which means you got tons of fucking food everywhere. I mean, people are still catching tons of crabs there. Alaska, offshore Alaska is the richest marine environment in the world. So you could see where a boat could just sort of get up there and, all of a sudden find themselves in Seattle, BC, British Columbia, Alaska.
With no effort at all.
No effort. Just following the coastline and fishing. And it'd basically be an accident almost.
It'd almost be like taking a cruise.
Well, if you fall asleep on a current, you're downstream. That's it. You only need oars if the water's not moving. That's it.
And there is a bit of a discrepancy between why them apparently founding America or whatever in the East and then not move. Why did it take them so long to come out West?
Those old maps, they do say that the Northwest was giant territory. I mean, even as late as Abraham Lincoln's famous quote on the giants.
Mm-hmm. I've actually got a little bit here. I'll share screen again, but I won't boom out hopefully this time.
Check your TCP/IP settings.
Thank you. So we have a region on maps called Fusang. This is what some have called a Chinese settlement that has existed from about 500 AD on, and there are multiple maps that show Fusang as a settlement, obviously sounding very Chinese. It says right here, Chinese colony. This is, where is this? This would be, I think would be Seattle would be, right? Approximately.
In the Puget Sound kind of thing up there?
You'd have to zoom out, but yeah.
There's an even larger, I mean, here it is, pretty big, pretty well labeled. Yeah. Pretty well labeled on the map. I mean, it's not a small area.
And when are these maps from?
Somewhere anywhere between this 15 1700s, give or take. And you have these, Chinese Tartars working on the railroads. And you have, the Boxer Rebellion and all these kind of things. So there's a long history of the Chinese and, the sort of Tartar race existing in that area. And to think that they couldn't, I mean, the Chinese have amazing ships. If you look at ships from China in like the 1400s, they absolutely
there's a ton of evidence for like Chinese artifacts found on the West Coast.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. So here's an interesting thing. Do you think the Uyghurs could fit into that somehow?
I know,
because those sure look like Uyghurs you popped up a second ago.
Mm-hmm.
So the Uyghurs, and I'll say it properly because I'm not afraid. The Uyghurs were very loosely associated with the Khan all through history. You can read the biggest books by the biggest names of the day. It was a 12th century missive sent to the Khan so that he didn't march his horde down through China, and the Uyghurs delivered the messages. They were the emissaries.
Wow.
As local peoples. And the Khan liked the symbols on the seal and pendant and on the letters so much, he made the Uyghurs teach it to his people. And so this is the origin of the Mongolian language. So until very, very recently, and from the outset, you could say the Uyghurs have been a prominent feature in the entire idea of Tartaria, all the way up to their genocide today.
Wow. Holy shit.
Yeah.
I mean, it is interesting because we got even the stories in Canada, the Chinese building the railroads.
Yeah. Absolutely. And to think that they were all like the mainstream story is that they were all just stolen, or like they were put on boats from, I mean, where were they getting them from Europe, and then putting them on carts and sending them over into Europe, and then getting on a boat and then putting them on a boat and turning them across the Atlantic Ocean to the East Coast, where then they stopped off the East Coast and then took a carriage ride from the East Coast to the West Coast just so they could start building a railroad.
Oh yeah, how did every white person that took the Oregon Trail died, but all the Chinamen made it?
Mm-hmm. And so here you have San Francisco, whose sewer system is extremely complex, well built, master level brick masonry, that is confusing, has many parts that have never been used, allegedly, that is the underpinnings of this city that is supposed to have been completely annihilated in 1906 during it was basically a combination. It was an earthquake and then there was a fire, like all back to back. And then they rebuilt the entire city of San Francisco, but you still have this insanely old and incredibly complex sewer system that survived both of those things.
Oh, untouched. Mm-hmm. And the sewer system is on scale with the initial creation of Salt Lake City. It was just perfect from the beginning. For what?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm just looking at some pictures here, and we'll have some pictures in the video when this comes through, so everyone can look at some pictures. But I mean, wow, this thing is fucking amazing. It reminds me of looking at the Great Wall of China, or just the brickmanship in it.
Yep. Yeah, master level masonry. That's another thing that
which is to me the thread of, like, yes, that's kind of what I consider the Tartaria thread, isn't it? Might be a bunch of different civilizations, I don't know, but it's like looking at the shit the Romans were making, looking at the roads, looking at the forts, looking at the Great Wall of China, looking at some of the stuff down in South America and Peru and in Argentina, and just like how masterful the stonework is. It's unbelievable.
You don't even have to go that far. I bet you probably have a post office or a courthouse in your own hometown that looks equally as impressive, that has a very shady and doesn't make a lot of sense Wikipedia page article about it, that probably involves some weird photo of like a whiteout sky that says that it was burned down, and it really wasn't burned down, and it had a different dome on it in like the 1870s, and then they tore it down 4 times and then rebuilt it. And it's just like, you can go to just about anywhere and you can find these incredible structures, and they have these insane stories, and you get to the point where you can basically start to play like it's almost like a Mad Lib. All of these buildings all over the world have these Mad Lib stories about how they got there, why they were built that way, who built it, how many times it burned down, even though they're amazing brick, stone, granite, marble, pillar. I mean,
you do see a lot of that out east, but out west,
yeah,
I don't like, maybe on the coast.
Yeah,
I could see Vancouver being more like
seem
that,
like there's going to be that here.
But I feel like we were
but...
in the fucking no man's land. You know what I mean? Like there's 1,000 miles of fucking
in Alberta, Saskatchewan,
in either direction. It's cold as fuck half the year. Like I figure, especially if we're talking like seafaring, which I think makes more sense, then it would make more sense to me that they were on the coast. Plus, we had all the ice on us like 10,000 years ago, which would have really just wiped out a lot of that evidence. So I feel like in like central northern Canada, we kind of miss out on some of that.
You probably did, but I will say that the American Midwest is chock full of these things.
Yeah.
Where I would argue was probably like during the Ice Age, when we were covered in ice, would have been fucking where you wanted to
brilliant.
Be. Yeah,
would have been a great place. And you have this evidence. So the connection that I made between Tartary and America stems from an even earlier race of people who I'm sure you're going to have more people on and talking about, but that mound builder race, we don't really have a name for them other than the mound builder culture, the mound builder race. I would also lump them in with a sort of like a canal building, terraforming race of ancient people. I don't know if they were giants. They probably were. If I'm gonna put a gun to my head, I'm probably gonna say that they were giants.
Yeah.
But I can't
Which would
prove
make
it.
sense. I mean, we have everything, especially in North America, was way bigger than it is now.
And the level of the terraforming on the scale that we're discussing would be made, and the quarrying and all of these things that you see evidence of, it makes sense if they were larger. I'm not saying that it is, but it makes more sense to me.
See, this is where my idea differs, but this is I think this is the poison in the bloodstream of the Tartary groups, that you have these different warring aspects, and unless they're bros like Flavortown and me, they cannot come to grips. Some people will say it was the giants. Some people will say it was a master race of builders. These were megaliths. Some people will say that these are some of the 12 tribes.
Yep. It's actually what I was getting into.
History of America, yeah, that goes right into it. But here you see the battles between different groups, so no one can decide and no one can agree, and people stop sharing info quite readily when they come to these impasses. And lately, when we talk about whether Alberta and Saskatchewan, say the word.
Saskatchewan?
Okay. Is there also a Saskatoon?
Yes, in Saskatchewan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Perfect.
You guys are teaching me. Now, these places, especially the Great Grass Sea, which we're always reinforced with this mindless horseboy thing, the Dothraki. These places don't seem to have as much. And the Grand Solar Minimum, Cyclic Catastrophe, Electric Universe crews have hopped in here and said, all your stuff is interesting. We have the answer. It's the only answer. And so there's quite a division. Now on to the Mormon thing, Flavor.
Well, yeah. So, I got to do a little bit of backing up first. To go back to the mound builder race, we have the mounds over in America, which you can find just about anywhere. I'm pretty sure most golf courses are on top of ancient mounds, and they've just never told us because it's just easier to put golf courses on them. I've found places where there are supposed to be burial grounds on old maps that line up directly with current golf courses.
Which the military owns the bulk of.
Yes. So you have these mounds in America all over. And then you also, in the Black Sea, Caspian Sea area and into Siberia, you have kurgans. I don't know the exact pronunciation, but kurgans are what they call Scythian burial mounds. So they are similar to American mound builders. They usually have stones on top of them. So I don't know if that's a feature that maybe we removed from ours, or if they legitimately were different and they just used stones and we didn't use stones like that on our mounds.
They are of this real quick.
Mm-hmm.
The Scythian Tartar connection historically is one of the strongest.
Yes.
When we talk about lineage, travel, geology, and geography.
Yes. Scythians are most likely the progenitors of the Tartar race, in my opinion. So most of the kurgans are found 1,000 to 2,300 feet above sea level, above permafrost. So, and they also tend to have same things that we would find in American burial grounds. So there were people buried under them. They were buried with trinkets, metal, gold. They're in the mountains, things like that. So we have, a precedence for a similar style of mound building culture in this area. There's the reason I got onto this rabbit hole was because of a monument in Volgograd, which is, I think it says St. Petersburg now. It's called the Motherland statue, or the Motherland Calls, in Mamayev Kurvin in Volgograd. And here, I'll share screen. this is the
Wow.
This is a very, very large statue. And you can see it's also built on a sort of pyramid.
Oh, yeah, right.
So this is a very
look
unique...
at how large that is.
Where is this?
Volgograd.
This
is
in Russia?
Mamayev Kurvin. So this is a battle memorial for the Battle of Volgograd, or I believe it's St. Petersburg.
Is that sword like 200 feet long? How long is the sword?
It's huge. It is ridiculously huge.
Well, look at the people on the path over there. They don't even match the base of the thing.
Right.
Oh, that's what I'm saying. The sword's got to be close to 100 feet.
Yeah. This thing's insane. So we have, there's a photo album I've got here. So this is a victory celebration. You can actually see all of the construction photos. There is a whole underground sort of subterranean area that they are digging out. I mean, look at this thing. And it's not anywhere to be found in the original. I mean, here's what it looks like now. I mean, all this stuff is completely underneath this pyramid here. And so they were building this insane infrastructure. Like, what is all this? And it looks like looks like they built it over a coliseum or something along those lines.
And that's the that's all there before. Yeah, and that's not the foundation. They're not building the foundation of that pyramid.
No, that's what excavating and bulldozing.
Yeah. This is where the statue is now. All of this. So they built it on top of this thing for whatever reason. I think so. Another thing that's interesting is that it's basically the statue itself. Yeah, see, you can get an idea of the scale here. I mean, this thing is massive, and its foundation just goes directly into the ground. It's not tethered. There's no like additional reinforcement. It's just straight down in. I mean, you can see these massive, and that's underneath of that is all of that stuff that they were digging out over there, the giant Colosseum. I mean, look at this guy. This guy's, I mean, the finger is probably 10 foot long, 12 foot long.
See the guy holding up his hand next to the hand.
Yeah.
I got to go see this place.
I believe they said that, I seem to remember reading that they replaced the sword sometime later. Yeah, here we go. It was originally made of stainless steel, but it swayed too much in the wind, so they replaced it in 1972. And here you can see the actual colonnade and all of the this looks like where they used to have military parades. I mean, this is just, I mean, the amount of work. I mean, you can see that the land here has been moved, terraformed.
Now, do you think that's in reverence to that? I mean, why would you build such a massive monument over something like that? Is it in reverence,
what I was asking myself.
Or is it in just to completely hide it?
Okay, so there is
it feels magical
book
to me. Yeah.
There's a book that I found called The Young Folks' History of Russia. And this was written in 1881. And it's just like it's basically a storybook for kids, or like a basic history kind of book. And it tells the story of Mamai Khan. So Mamai Khan was a general in the Golden Horde army. He fought against the Christians in 1380. But the Mamai Khan was, in this story, standing on an ancient burial ground in this area, because Mamayev Kurgan is the name of this area. It is based off Mamayev Kurgan. As we said, Kurgan was the burial mound. So Mamayev Kurgan means the kurgan of Mamayev, right? So that's the name of this hill that they fought this battle on. That hill is where that statue is now. So they built the motherland statue on top of the kurgan of Mamai.
Wow.
It is the finest example locally of iconoclasm. We're going to build our monument on top of your monument. Yes.
So the monument was originally a mound. And so I found this book in 1881 that says that Mamai, so this is supposed to be the mound of Mamai. Yet, when you read the story of Mamai, you find that he is standing on an ancient burial mound. So the burial mound is not even Mamai's burial mound. It's just something he is associated with.
It's been replaced, like it's been renovated 3 or 4 times.
Yes. So this was some kind of burial mound before it was even named for Mamayev, it wasn't even his burial mound. That's just where he fought his battle. That's it. So we have this like reshaping of history through World War II, which obviously that's kind of like the last nail in the coffin. World War II was kind of that last nail of the reset, like the previous reset and history faking and extermination that we
they
had.
swept the board.
Yeah, I want to circle back around to something before we go into too far in time here,
sure.
because I want to keep it relevant to the first part. So you mentioned, and this sort of has to do with the World War II part now, and then what you mentioned in 1492, which seems to be the start of this erasing of the history or changing the history, and this kind of like rejig of everything. So, and you mentioned it could be a bunch of different things: cataclysms, rewriting history, wars, all that stuff. So does the Bolshevik Revolution play into part of that cleaning up towards the end?
Yeah, so that would be, so I said in the beginning that there was like 2 kind of main resets. You have the one in the 1500s,
Yeah.
which were the rise of the forgeries. And then you have a second one, I like to call it like a light reset light, in the 1800s. And like basically what time period of about 1800 through 1942 is the second reset. Starting kind of with the whole Napoleon 1811, the Napoleon's comet. That's also the same year of the New Madrid earthquake on the Mississippi River, starting in the New Madrid, Missouri. They say it's an 8.2 on the Richter scale, but the Richter scale wasn't invented for another 130 years. So what the hell are they talking about? It made the Mississippi River run backwards. It was preceded by a comet that is called both Napoleon's comet and Tecumseh's comet. So you have 2 different lore of the same comet that was seen in that period of time. So that's kind of, for me, like the sort of esoteric start of this, because in the wake of a natural disaster, you can go in and you can rewrite history. And then you have, of course, the conflicts of the Civil War in the United States. You also have at the same time the Crimean War between the French and the Russians. You have many global conflicts that lead up until World War I, World War II. So that's the second stage. That's also the rise of the oligarchs and the oil oligarchs and the bankers and basically the people that created this current society. That previous 100 years of cataclysm and strife and destruction and repurposing led to these people showing up and creating the new society through the World's Fairs and the expositions and these massive displays of out with the old, in with the new.